In the 6th and 5th centuries BCE, the discipline of philosophy began to supplant mythical storytelling. Thinkers from the scattered Greek islands employed reason, observation, and causal inference to interrogate the world. They asked, what existed in the beginning? Where did everything originate? What constitutes the substance of the visible world? These men were known as the Presocratics. Hello all, my name is Heraclitus of Ephesus, and I welcome you to the channel. Here we review and analyze seminal works of the Western philosophical canon. If such explorations interest you, consider liking and subscribing. Your algorithm will thank you for it. But without further ado, let us examine the Penguin's Classics edition of early Greek philosophy edited by Jonathan Barnes. This volume compiles primary fragments from the thinkers known as the Presocratics, a term that Barnes rightly criticizes as misleading, given that many of these thinkers, Parmenides, Anaxagoras, Democritus, just to name a few, actually overlapped and were contemporaries of Socrates and Plato. In fact, Plato himself dramatized a dialogue between a Parmenides and a young Socrates in his aptly titled text, Parmenides. But I digress. As this is my first review of a philosophical text, I will be remiss not to define philosophy itself. Philosophia, the love of wisdom, is the discipline of constructing rigorous descriptive and prescriptive claims. A descriptive claim holds truth value when its predicate accurately corresponds to reality. For example, in 2024, the S&P 500 rose 20%, over 20%. All humans are mortal. The molecule of glucose comprises 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 12 oxygens. Prescriptive claims derive value, on the other hand, from their capacity to promote net good. For example, good descriptive claims include: you should exercise every single day. You should abstain from drugs. You shall have no other gods before me. If such assertions seem too broad to be philosophy, please recall that philosophy is the art that birthed all the sciences and influenced many of the other arts as well. Every is claim or every ought claim statement is inherently philosophy. Barnes's text reconstructs pre-Socratic thought through the fragments preserved by later Greek, Roman, and even Christian writers. For example, you have Hippolytus, who wrote The Refutation of All Heresies, and with this, we were able to get a good summary, although a biased one, of many of the pre-Socratic thinkers. We have Clement, Plutarch, and Aristotle. The endurance of these Greek texts testifies to the Presocratics' profound influence, as later thinkers grappled with their ideas centuries after their deaths. The Presocratics focused primarily on descriptive metaphysics and cosmology, with scant attention to ethics or politics. Although there are some exceptions to this, right? For example, I recall that Heraclitus, venturing into polemics, condemned his fellow Ephesians for exiling his own ally, who was a good friend of his. Yet, their central project, the project of the early Greek thinkers, was identifying this primordial substance, capital S, underlying reality. Thales of Miletus, often hailed as the first philosopher, proposed that water was his foundational substance. Thales was a polymath, a statesman, and astronomer who predicted famously a solar eclipse. Thales rejected mythological explanations for natural phenomenon, privileging reason and empirical inquiry. Anaximenes, although less renowned, argued that air was his fundamental element. drawing conclusions from meteorological patterns in his native city. His works survive only in traces, yet his monistic conviction that a single substance underpins all matter resonates. Pythagoras posited that numbers are in fact reality's essence. He formed a secret society that blended mathematics, mysticism, and ethics, living the ethical life. For example, his followers were ascetics. They abstained from eating luxurious food and drinking. His followers further were vegetarians because they believed in reincarnation and did not want to harm anybody else, animal or man. His cult's anecdotes are very interesting, such as when Pythagoras intervened from a dog being beaten because he heard the voice of an old friend crying out from within the dog. Despite this eccentricity, his philosophical legacy, that of Heraclitus, and his mathematical legacy cannot be denied. Moving on, you have Heraclitus of Ephesus, right? Yours truly, who theorized a perpetual flux. He said that you cannot step into the same water twice. You cannot step into the same river twice, because the minute you step into a given river, the second time, it's not the same waters that pass through your feet, and you are no longer the same man. You've grown, or perhaps you degenerated. Perhaps you have grown wiser. Perhaps you have grown weaker. Perhaps you have grown more temperate. But his point is that everything and everyone is in a constant state of transformation. He symbolized this dynamism with a cosmic fire, declaring conflict. War is the father of all things, intrinsic to existence itself. This stands in stark contrast to the thinker Parmenides, who denied change and flux entirely. His poem, On Nature, distinguishes the way of truth being conceived as a single, eternal, and unchanging homogeneous being that everything is a part of. And he distinguishes this way of truth from the way of opinion, or doxa, which is the illusory sensory world. It may appear as though everything is different, but in fact, this occludes the fundamental monistic truth, the non-dualist truth. This rationalist monism, to think and to be are one, challenged Heraclitean flux. You have the thinker Empedocles, whose fragments dominate the collection. He attributed a fundamental law of the universe to be that there are two forces which govern it, that of love and strife, attraction and repulsion. And these forces acted on the four elements: air, fire, earth, and water. Anaxagoras, on the other hand, thought that there was a divine mind known as a nous that manipulated this formless blob into everything that we see. On the other hand, you also have the thinker Democritus, who theorized that there were indivisible particles that formed the reality and matter of everything. Tragically, with regards to Democritus, most of his writings, and he was a very prolific writer, he talked about ethics, biology, and politics, were lost to censorship, and time, including deliberate destruction by Christians in the post-Constantinian age. But in summation, Barnes's compilation excels in accessibility and contextual clarity. Although deeper, character-specific commentary would enhance its scholarly utility and readability. But given the fact that so many of these fragments and so many of these thinkers' works were lost to time, you can only ask for so much. I definitely enjoyed the translation and the way in which the chapters were ordered. However, I think that a more lengthy exposition at the beginning of every single chapter on the thinker itself would have been invited and would have been very well appreciated. And that said, if you delve into this book, the Penguin Classics edition of the early Greek thinkers, you're most likely there for the primary sources themselves. And in that case, it excels excellently because every single fragment that you see and that you read is easily readable. It is placed in good context with other fragments, so that way you can try to form a little bit of a puzzle, an incomplete one, but a puzzle nonetheless, on what many of these thinkers thought and how these ideas influence Western culture and Western thought. In closing, I hope this review illuminates the Penguin's Classic edition of Early Greek Philosophy by Barnes. Make sure to visit your library and secure a copy, or get yourself one from the internet or Amazon. I am Heraclitus of Ephesus, your host. Until next time, peace.